Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to my wonderful guest, Austin. How are you doing, mate?
Hey, man. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Nice to see you again, Alex, and get to speak after a few months off.
Yeah, absolutely. You were on my when were you last on my channel? It was a while ago.
It must have been a while ago. It must have been probably like April
Yeah.
time, April, something
Gosh.
like that. Yeah, it was a while back after talking about East Grinstead Town Council. But hey, there's been a lot that has been going on in between then and now, so there's more than enough to talk about today.
Oh, I can't wait. For those of you in the chat, Austin is somebody who came and protested in November outside the IES event at St. Hill, and has since started his own channel, Devotion Demystified. So please go and show him some love and give him a subscribe. This is his channel here. And Austin has been really prolific in helping me with my activism here, and has been helping fly the flag here in the UK, and went to some East Grinstead Town Council meetings and all that sort of stuff. So thank you, Austin.
Oh,
Um,
don't worry about it.
I want to say hi to some people in the chat as well before we jump into it. I am still a little bit sick, so I've got a bit of a croaky voice. Sorry. But hello, Cherokee, Joy, morning, Alex from Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. SP Crusader Leanie's here. Looking forward to this. Love it. Hey, Alex, finally catching a live. Hello. And Karen is also here. Hi, Alex and everybody. Danielle Chamberlain's in the house. We got a good crowd. Nice. We've even got Sam Sudi here, the SP chef. Evening, all darlings. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the election. Obviously, the election has now happened. We have a Labour government in power at the moment. But before the election, obviously, it was all up for grabs. And Mims Davies, who is the Member of Parliament for Scientology's headquarters, St. Hill in East Grinstead, she is considered a Labour Conservative safe seat. She's represented the area for many years. She was also the Disabilities Minister, and we've been trying to get her attention and say, hey, look, you attended the IAS event in November, and do you think that's appropriate considering all the allegations of abuse and fraud and all this stuff that's going on about against Scientology at the moment? And she's been quite reluctant to get involved or say too much, but we identified an opportunity because before the election there was what's called a hustings. Do you want to explain what a hustings is to maybe our American viewers and people who don't know what that is?
Yeah, exactly. A hustings is really just a fancy word for a debate, if you can call it that. But it's a place where all election candidates in a constituency being a voting district in the UK, get the opportunity to be questioned on any policies, national or local, with their voters. So unlike the things that you would see on the BBC, ITV, these national broadcasters, hustings are local and they're meant to be for local residents. So it's the opportunity where you actually get to see the people you're voting for and question them on things that you care about. There's normally one or two, at least in each constituency. Some of them will have a certain theme. I know there's some that were in my local area themed directly around climate change, some around housing, depending on who the organizer is and whatever they're doing. And we were lucky enough, or I was lucky enough to go down to one in East Grinstead, which was hosted by a Methodist church. So probably more open to religious discussion at that point. With all, I think, 8 of the candidates who were standing in East Grinstead and Uckfield, which include, as you said, Mims Davis, the MP who has had a relationship to some degree with Scientology over the past, 4 years at least, but she's been in her seat since 2014. No?
Something like that. Yeah, she's been representing St. Hill for some time. There were some constituency boundary changes, but I think Mims Davies has been the MP for St. Hill for a while. And yeah, so she was spotted at the IES event, IES being International Association of Scientologists, the big gathering in November. We were protesting outside, and I think it's important. I know that politics is very similar in most countries in terms of the setup, but it's important to just frame this with the way the UK government system works. So you elect in the UK election, not the leader or necessarily a party. You elect a person who is part of a party to represent you in your local area. So you could vote for Mims Davies, who is a conservative, and she then represents your area and your interests in the wider parliament. Now, those individual people may be outed from their party, and that may cause a by-election, or they may continue standing as independent, and it all gets a bit complicated around that sort of thing. But the purpose of a member of parliament is to represent you as a constituent in parliament, so represent your views, local issues. And when there's an election, it's a really pivotal time, because that's when politicians are trying to win votes. So they're listening to local concerns and trying to figure out, what do you guys want? Once they're elected, there's much less pressure because they're safe until the next election. So they're obviously under an obligation to listen to local residents, but they're not under as much of as much scrutiny or pressure to be active and engaged in the local community as when there's an election. And that's why this was important.
Yeah, exactly. And it's fair to say that in the UK, we have 650 MPs, I believe it is. So there's a lot of different representatives. And unlike the US, we do vote, like you said, for our local candidates. And that has its pros and cons. Obviously, it means that when we are having local issues, you have that person who you can go to very easily, who is probably a member of the community, that through one or two different boundaries or sort of distinctions from yourself, you probably know them or know of them. But it does mean that as well, that there's the positive that they will sometimes not always toe the party line. They will, bend things to help the residents, which is only fair. It's not like they're just going to have a monopoly when it comes to just their local area. But I think what's really good about the opportunity that I had going down to see these politicians was that regardless of whether any of them were to get elected, and obviously one of them who I spoke to did, the others didn't, I was still able to plant some seeds in some minds, or at least plant a seed in the MP's mind, that this is an issue relevant to local people that they need to be aware of. And hopefully that will also give some boosting, bolster, cannon fodder, whatever you want to call it, going forward when we have further discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Scientology has been on the local agenda, I suppose, in East Grinstead and Sussex for a long time. L. Ron Hubbard bought St. Hill Manor in 1959, so they've had a presence there for, like, what's that? My maths is bad, but 70 years, right? It's a long time. So they've had a presence in the town. People in the local area know about what's going on there. There's been lots of press coverage, but especially recently with the Daily Mail article uncovering and exposing, I suppose, the town council and the mayor and their association, and we've talked about that previously. So it's on local people's minds right now, and I wanted to really make sure that we were doing everything we can to ensure that local residents were asking politicians about it, especially in and around East Grinstead. And so I'm really thankful for you going to the hustings, because it's such a great opportunity. You wrote about it on Scientology Business, so there's a link in the description. We're not going to read through the article, but this is Austin's article on Scientology Business, where he talks about the experience. And there's a picture here just so people can see what it looks like. These are all the candidates that are standing. Mims Davies is there in the sort of pinky, peachy jacket. You had to send your question ahead of time. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. And I sent the question ahead of time and they accepted it. So it seemed like it was actually on the list of questions to be said. However, I think we just got timed out with the way that the night was going. At least 2 minutes for each candidate to respond. And when you have 8 candidates, that's at least 16 minutes a question.
It's a
Over
long
2
time.
hours. It's a long time, and it dragged on for a little bit. But yeah, unfortunately, we weren't able to get that. But I was able to speak to some candidates after the fact and get some raw reactions.
What was the question that you had prepared that you wanted to ask officially in front of the audience?
Good point. I believe it was something along the lines of, given the recent allegations and reactions around the practices of the Scientology organization, what would you do to people who had concerns, who were both within the organization but were wanting to leave and required support? It was something along those lines. I don't know if it was included in the article, Alex, or whether I
Yeah,
might have said it earlier.
what you sent to me was, this is the wording: given the Church of Scientology's presence in the constituency and the widely known reports of abuse, modern slavery, and human trafficking in the organization, what would the candidates do if elected to ensure that Scientologists in East Grinstead and Uckfield are safe from abuse? Which I
Yeah.
think is a pretty valid question.
Yeah, and I made sure it was succinct and to the point. And it was very valid because, like you said earlier, this is something which is on local residents' minds, especially post the things with East Grinstead Town Council and also with Narconon.
Mm.
Because after the event was happening, I did speak to a couple of other people who were there, and they all knew about stuff with Fraser Visser, and they were all saying, "Oh, the Conservatives, right? They have some links to Scientology." So it was definitely relevant. It was a concern, and I was glad that actually the chair acknowledged it and wasn't fully dismissive of the comment or the question at the first instance, because it could well have been something that he just wrote off and just said, "Actually, this is not of public interest. A weird talk about grass
like
verges or being."
like the mayor did at the council.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, do you want to talk us through what the day was like? What happened when you arrived? Like, just talk us through what the experience was like, because I've never been to hustings
Oh,
before. So,
really?
talk
Well,
us through what that was like.
so to start off, I think it started at 7, so you get there a little bit early. I went into East Grinstead town a little bit before just to reminisce and enjoy some nice views and a quick bite to eat. But as you turn up, it was held out as I said, a church. It was fully packed. It was over 100 people who attended. The car park was full. People were being asked to park on the street and walk up. And as you go in, you've got activists from each candidate handing you as much election leaflet, relevant bits and pieces, and trying to have a chat with you as you enter. So you get bombarded as you go in, but after that, you're welcome to take your seat anywhere. You can have a look around. You've got all these things to read, and then by that point, there was just a bit of waiting around until formally all the candidates turned up. And it often is the case at hustings that I've been to that a candidate will bail. They just won't turn up, won't speak, but they'll be on the paper, ballot, whatever. But thankfully, all did turn up. We started just about on time. And it was quite interesting to see that I was not alone on my crusade, at least regarding Scientology. There was someone known to us who did also attend. Do you want to
Yeah.
explain that, Alex?
Well, there's a couple of people that I know that were in the room.
Well, one of them beginning with Liz, right?
Oh yeah, so of course Liz Osterman is the PPRO UK. Her job basically is to safe point local government officials, and she's the one that works at St Hill that's responsible for sugarcoating everything and buttering people up, local officials, politicians, decision makers, and she's the main point of contact for local government and the Church of Scientology. So anytime there's any sort of government event, whether it be a council meeting or a hustings or whatever, you can expect Liz Osterman to show up. And I'm really not surprised at all that she was
Right.
there. This is the sort of thing she would want to be at, just to show her face and indicate to the politicians that she's engaged and she's interested. She's representing the Church of Scientology, who are interested in local community events. And that's the sole reason. It's not because Scientology want to necessarily influence the debate, but they want to have a presence to put the image across that they're interested in the local community. When in actual fact, it's more of a schmoozing opportunity where Liz Osterman might get 2 or 3 minutes at the end of the event to have a quick chat with all of the candidates and start to build a relationship with them if she hasn't already got one, so that later down the line she's not a complete stranger when she asks for favors on behalf of the church.
Exactly the case. And I bet she would have taken some time, whether it was at the start or the end, to hand out a few handshakes, reintroduce herself, make herself known, not because she had anything substantive to say or do, but rather, like you said, by having her presence there, she is increasing a relationship with whoever she may need to. Not to be pessimistic, but it's probably most likely the case, so that she has that later on down the line and that gas in the tank for whatever she may require it to be used
Yeah.
for.
Let's not forget the policy, the safe point, dictates that the whole purpose of engaging with local government officials, politicians, all this sort of thing, opinion leaders, is for the sole purpose of bringing them under PR area control. Like Scientology want to control the local area from a PR perspective. The idea is that the politicians, opinion leaders, decision makers will look the other way when allegations of abuse or whatever come up. It's just so disproportionate to what their understanding of Scientology is, because their experience of Scientology has only been the wonderful, lovely, smiley Liz Osterman who donates to local charities. The Scientology group are lovely people. They can't possibly be doing all of these things that people are saying they are. That's the purpose
Yeah,
of the PPRO UK. That's what Liz is there to do, is not to deny allegations, not to have a a PR discussion, but simply to be the smiley, happy face so that it creates a contrast between what Scientology actually is and how it comes across.
exactly. And it's not like she's the only one who's done this in the recent history. We know that Graham Wilson, obviously with OSA, he's been to East Grinstead Town Council events. I'm sure if anyone on here wants to go down to an East Grinstead Council run event, someone will have a Scientology link there for some reason. It's going to be the case, isn't it? Yeah, so at least she was spotted there. We know her motive, but at least Scientology didn't. Well, maybe I don't know. Scientology ought to have been on the question list to have maybe spurred the moment. But we got
Yeah.
some comments nonetheless, which we'll go over in a minute.
Yeah. So talk me through. You showed up, there were lots of flyers and stuff. You sat down, everyone arrived. Then what happens?
Then what happens? Well, it was a 2 hour long event, so it was chaired by someone who was just he wasn't a minister, but he was someone who worked for the church where it was being held. So he organised it, he did the bookings and everything.
As in
All
the
the
Methodist
candidates,
church, the
yeah.
venue, not the Church of Scientology. Just want to
Yes, indeed.
clarify
Yeah,
that.
Methodist Church, completely unrelated, right?
Yeah.
So he's there, he's running it. He gives each candidate 2 minutes where all of them had a pre-prepared speech to introduce themselves, why they cared, why they were there, what they're standing for. They were all kept very much to a 2 minute timer. If you go over that, you were stopped, so your mic was turned off. So that was all very fair, and he was trying to be as concise as possible. After each candidate was asked the various things about introducing themselves, they all get asked a question, and it's all each response is given in a certain order, so as to make it fair. So not any one candidate always goes first, one candidate always goes last. It's a randomized order each time, so that everyone gets a fair response. The first question I think was to do with housing. Then we had other questions that went on about the local health organisation that has taken over running of GPs, general practitioners, so primary care in the area. We had other questions to do with cost of living. We had questions on climate change. We didn't have any questions on education. We did have some more on unemployment and job opportunities, but I think we got through about 6 questions in total across the night, all with that same format, where each candidate got 2 minutes to respond on this issue. They went through one by one, and to each candidate's discretion, they would either keep it to very succinctly what the question asked, or some of them were able to shoehorn in other political opinions, policies, as and where. But it was a broad range of questions that were asked that went on for 2 hours, as I said. When you have each candidate
You trooper.
yeah, it was going on for a while, man. I did enjoy my free tea and coffee to get through the night, let me say that. But it went on for 2 hours. We got a good range of things. The most entertaining thing, dare I say, was that there was a candidate from the English Democrat Party who let's just say he had a screw loose somewhere. He was going on and on about everything, and let's say he had some very controversial views I don't want to talk too much about on YouTube for the sake of any words flagging up, because he was a funny lad. He's a funny old man. But we got through it in the end, and after the hustings, it was just an opportunity really just to chill out, talk to some other people who were in the event, catch the candidates after the fact for a bit of an off-record chat. And a fair few people did stay. And after the event happened, I was there for probably about 40 minutes after, because
Wow.
a lot of people had a lot of different questions. And
Yeah.
in all fairness to the event, it was well balanced. There was local and national issues. It was just a shame that my questions didn't get picked.
Yeah. Someone here, love it, is saying that sounds very fair. It does sound, I think it's a set format, isn't it, for like
Yeah,
political debates in the UK, is it's usually chaired by someone who's impartial. And the whole point is everybody gets the same amount of time across the spectrum. So it's set up so that it's not a one-sided event. And it sounds like it was quite fair in the way that it was held. It just sounds like there was so many questions they didn't
yeah.
get round to asking yours, but you got the chance to speak to them afterwards.
True, true. And just another word on what we're saying there is that yes, it was fair, and it's not a debate in the sense that people are responding to each other. It depends on the hustings that you go to and like the format that they wish to do it. Obviously, with the amount of candidates that they had, in order for everyone to be able to respond, it probably didn't. They didn't have the time really. But some hustings you might get again one more minute to respond to somebody else.
Yeah.
And aside from it being, fair, it was impartial. And I think the audience as well were representative from what I could see of the actual local demographic. It wasn't like it was all old people, or it wasn't like it was all young people. When people were responding to each candidate, it wasn't that like everyone was silent for a certain person because they were all left wing or right wing or whatever. It was a very fair, I think, event and process, and it was good to hear some fair and honest responses when I spoke to them after.
One thing that I've learned from, I've been engaging with politicians since November, right? So it's not even a year. Um, and I've learned very quickly that British politics is not just slow, but it's just so convoluted, and it can be quite boring, if I'm
Yeah,
honest, at the
yeah,
local government level. Debates in Parliament and such are much more interesting to watch. But from the council meetings and stuff that we've been to, the public questions are great because it stimulates a bit of debate and there's a bit of discussion. But I have tuned in to, I can't even count how many different planning meetings, meetings of different council committees and finance and general purpose committees, and all of this sort of stuff. And it quite often is an hour or two of just formalities, procedures, very boring stuff, but very important stuff.
yeah,
For example, planning is not a very exciting topic to discuss, but it's really important to ensure that local community are considered, and the impact on the environment and all of these things. It's not exciting to hear people talking about drain pipes and drainage and fire safety and all of this stuff, but if that process wasn't there, those things would get overlooked. So
yeah,
I find it interesting going to things like this or hearing about them, because 2 hours of hearing people talk about their views on different local issues, it can it can drag on, but it's vitally important. And it
yeah.
sounds like they balanced it in a way that it wasn't too boring, I hope.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like what you said there really resonates with me as someone who sat through a lot of local government meetings before in various capacities. And it is the case, isn't it? It's very tedious. Sometimes it takes a long time, but ultimately these things are important. And it's good that we have devolved governments and local governments where people who are part of a community get to have a say on how their community is built, how their community functions, what they want improved, what they think money needs to be spent on, because that's something that local people ought to have power over, rather than someone just in a national office who has no understanding of the needs and desires of the local people.
Would
But
you
yeah,
say the local community that were there at the hustings were quite politically engaged? Because we see in quite a lot of communities, especially younger people in the UK, they'll have a lot to say on social media, and there'll be lots of people
mm,
talking about stuff online. But when it comes to the actual on the ground politics, face to face meetings and hustings, and writing to your local MP
yeah,
and such like that, that's a very different kettle of fish. And I think there are a lot of people that talk about action but never follow it through, and there are some communities that are a lot more politically engaged than others. What was your sense from that
so
in East Grinstead?
yeah, I think it's really interesting when we think about hustings, because I think that they are the best opportunity for local people to actually understand their candidates. They are by far. You can have the opportunity, or there is the opportunity, if you so wish, to vote in the polling station for your MP and not actually meet your MP or meet your local candidates, understand any local questions, because you just hear it all through the national news, which is fine. It is what most people do, because hustings don't always happen. I was lucky that in my constituency where I live permanently, there was one. East Grinstead had 9 different hustings over the course of the election campaign, which is pretty much unheard of. That is very good for the democratic process. The neighbouring constituency to where I live didn't have any. So as a politically active constituency, I would say yes, they are. East Grinstead and Uckfield and the local authorities that are within that larger constituency do have a fairly decent turnout when it comes to local government voting. And they do vote for individuals who are, again, representative of their community, and not in a nationalistic way, as in like, I always vote Labour when I vote for my MP, I'm going to vote Labour when it comes to my local town councillor. No, actually, it's far broader, and there's far more colour in this spectrum of people who are actually elected into local government, because they're voting with actually a critical eye on all these things, I'd say, especially in East Grinstead. And yeah, when I was there, I thought it was, again, fair, honest. But the downside of hustings is that, to an extent, you are probably already preaching to the converted. You're probably there because you are already politically minded. You probably already have a tendency as to who you're going to vote for. If you ask people honestly before the event, if they were undecided as to who they were voting for that day, I imagine there would probably only be a spatter of hands in that place. But it was good, nevertheless, for that opportunity to be there, and not least for there to be so many opportunities in that local area, that actually there was some movement, albeit Mims did retain her seat. There was some movement in the overall result of the constituency election.
There does seem to be like quite a big push in East Grinstead to get the local population engaged with politics in a way that I don't see here in Hackney in London, for example. You know, like East Grinstead Town Council, which is the very lowest level of local government. Anybody can watch any of their council meetings on Zoom and ask a public question. And there are guidelines in terms now, following what happened recently with us. There are now guidelines in terms of what you can say and when. But, you know, the fact that they are trying to make politics at the lowest levels accessible to all and trying to engage the local population is, I think, really important, and we don't see that everywhere. So it's interesting that East Grinstead, which is where St. Hill is, Scientology's home, is one of those places that is really pushing for people to get involved, because that's quite risky for Scientology, because the last thing Scientology wants is for people to talk about Scientology, unless they're a Scientologist that's approved by the Office of Special Affairs.
True. And I just did some Googling just to check actually some of the figures. And nationally, turnout for the UK general election this year was one of the worst since universal suffrage, so that all people over the age of 18, man or woman, could actually turn out to vote. The prediction is about 52% of the voting age.
Wow.
Well, the electorate actually turned out and voted. But if we compare that to East Grinstead and Uckfield, that was at 67%. So that's considerably higher. It's not great. Still 67%. If you were doing a test, you'd probably say that's a bit rubbish. But still, that's considerably above the national average in an election period, dare I say as well. A lot of people would have seen it as a open and shut case as to who was going to win, especially given the landslide we saw as a result.
Yeah. So tell us about what happened after the debate. You stuck around and you spoke. Do you speak to every candidate, or did you just speak to the main ones?
No, it was a bit tricky, because there were a lot of people wanting to speak to everybody, aside from the man who I said was from the English Democrats, who I think probably could have used with getting out as fast as
Quickly.
I think a few people really had some things to say to him. But I was able to speak to 3 of the candidates. Specifically, I spoke to Mims Davis, the Conservative Party candidate, and the MP for East Grinstead Uckfield. I spoke to the Labour Party candidate, and I spoke to the Green Party candidate. So aside from Mims, who obviously won this election, I didn't speak to the second highest poller, Benedict Dempsey, although he did very well. He was the Liberal Democrat candidate. I did speak to Ben Cox of the Labour Party, who still got 20% of the vote. And I spoke to the Green Party candidate, who got 10% of the vote. So I was able to speak to some big names in there. Nevertheless, it was just a shame that I couldn't speak to everybody as they were rushing out the door. But it was still some decent opinions and some sound bites I got from them.
But you did get to speak to Mims Davies, who's the most important one in that area. You know, it was expected that she was going to win the election in that area because she's a conservative and it's a conservative safe seat. Even though the Conservatives didn't win the election, it's a safe seat. I would have been very surprised if she didn't win.
Yeah.
So she was in some ways the most important one to speak to. And how did that go down? Did you just walk up to her and say, "Tell me about Scientology"?
Yeah, legit. She had given her farewell handshakes and was halfway out the door before I pounced. And I got her as she was walking out. She was with one of her aides, like a political aide who was there, obviously, like, or a campaign manager. So I was able to ask her, and I was able to reiterate the same sort of question, pretty much to the T, that we spoke earlier about, which was specifically about the presence in the constituency and the reports of abuse, modern slavery, harassment, etc. What would you do if you were elected? And I made sure I said, if you were elected, to ensure that people in East Grinstead and Uckfield, Scientologist or not, are safe from this abuse. And she was very firm. She was forthright and she was honest from what I could gather. And she said that people who are facing any harassment or abuse need to have a solicitor with them, and they need to be aware that nobody is above the law. And she repeated that multiple times, including the Church of Scientology. And I found that very kind. But I also then wanted to make her aware that, you know, you did actually go to their fundraising event and you did take money from this organization.
I
Because
love that.
people who you're protecting and you're saying that you're with have obviously felt very hard done by. It's a bit two-faced to say, on the one hand, yes, I'm with you and I'll protect you if there's any abuse, but at the same time, despite these wide reports, you are still going to their event, which
This
is
is
just a bit
this
absurd.
this is the thing to remember. When Mims Davies shakes hands with staff members at St. Hill, Church of Scientology executives, she is shaking hands with victims of modern slavery, right?
Yeah,
These people are not allowed to leave the property without permission. They are bussed on and off the property every morning and every evening. They get paid £50 a week to work 7 days a week, 9 a.m. till 10 p.m., often much later hours. They're not generally allowed to have their own mobile phones. If they do, they are checked and censored. The people Mims Davies would be meeting would likely have mobile phones and things because they're the ones in public facing positions. But nonetheless, they all live under the same standards, and they are all, for all intents and purposes, modern slaves. So when she says that she supports, you know, people contacting the police and will do what she can to support them, at the same time, she's going and meeting them and not realizing that she's engaging with victims of abuse herself.
Yeah, and this is something that I really reiterate in my personal life when I speak to people about Scientology, because all my friends who are not really in this community, that they always ask, like, why are you so, you know, ferociously against this organization? Well, I'm like, if you watch a Tom Cruise movie, you do know that the way that he operates is because he is backed up by a team of people who are living in terrible conditions and do not have the freedoms and liberties that the rest of us care to enjoy. You know, if you go to, dare I say, a Christmas light switch on and switch on their lights, you're doing that to turn on lights that were put up by people who aren't fed properly or aren't paid fairly. These are people who, it could well have been you, I, anybody else, because they're just victims at the end of the day. And we need to make sure that people are aware. And when you're in local government and you're representative of a constituency, or you're even just going to an event, you need to read up on what you're going to, who it's run by, and have some basic awareness. And dare I say, it would take just a very basic of awareness for a local politician to know that maybe going to an event run by this organization is not in their best interest or the interest of those who they represent, which is why it's annoying that we have, for example, Mims Davies going to this fundraiser, Fraser Visser going to the Mission Impossible premiere. It's for for local residents or people abused by this organization, it's hurtful. It's not fair. It's not right.
Yeah, I think that's why it's important that we're doing this work that we are, because it's not just about calling out politicians, it's about educating them as well. You know, when I first started engaging with the town council, I went in with a let me sit down with you guys and brief you for an hour or two for an hour or two to inform you
Yep.
on Scientology's policies and procedures, like to inform you on why this is important, because I don't think you realize that when Liz Osterman shows up to give you, you know, cucumber sandwiches with the crust cut off, and you go to the event and shake hands with people, yes, it all sounds very lovely and fairly harmless. But what you're doing is enabling and therefore supporting abuse, and you're not going to see that abuse firsthand, because there are going to be a team of dedicated Sea Org members whose sole job it is to ensure that you don't see the abuse. There's no way you're going to walk into someone on the RPF at St. Hill if you're a local politician. They will be kept far, far away from anywhere you're ever going to go near. And so, because of this whole structure and organization to ensure you're not aware of it, you're not going to see it. So it's important that you know that this is what this organization is doing, and it's not necessarily about putting people down for going to Scientology events. It is about educating them.
Yeah.
Once they know, once they've been informed and are educated, if they then choose to continue to go to events at St. Hill, then that's on them and they need to be called out for it. But
Exactly.
if they do have genuine ignorance, you know, fair play. So that's why it's important we go in educating first, and then accountability comes after.
Exactly, and this is the message that is really positive and is right to put over. It's that if there is genuine ignorance, one can only say that actually, you know, fair enough. Like, you know, you're doing whatever you're doing, whether that's accepting money for a local charity, probably in their best interest. However, on the balance of probabilities, we can say, especially in Fraser Visser's case and as well in Mims Davis' case, have they been educated well enough to know that going to this gala was not a good idea? I'd have them say they know it's not a good idea, but they're doing it to appease whoever is going to help them. And
The telling tale, the sign, I think, will be October this year, because I am pretty sure, even though I haven't had the opportunity to brief the whole council, in light of the Daily Mail article and the recent activism that you, others, and I have been doing, I don't see a world in which any of those politicians would, in their right mind, go to St. Hill. But we shall see.
We shall. We don't know who wants to do whatever up to that point. It would be a very silly idea, in my opinion. But you know, stranger things have happened, haven't they?
Yeah.
And it's worth just going back to actually how Mims responded to my comment when I said,
Yes.
I did, you know, I was saying, well, how do you think that felt? And she said, well, I attend a lot of events, some run by organizations I support and others I don't. And she said, I've never done anything others haven't. Remember, though, no one's above the law.
For me, that's such a cop out. It's like, I've not done anything anyone else hasn't done.
Yeah.
Like,
well, some people have done terrible atrocities before, but hey, it doesn't
saying
matter
that other people have done it is not an excuse for doing it.
It's ludicrous. It's a bit of a silly cop out, like you said.
I think it would have been much more respectful for her to say, you know what, I went to the event, I didn't really understand what I was getting into. I've now learnt more about the organization. I didn't know stuff before that I now know, and I will reconsider, or I will carefully consider my decision when they invite me again next year. That's what I would expect a politician to say. That would be a good answer. Not saying I'm not going to go next year, but saying I realize there's a lot of controversy around this group and I'm going to think more about it next time. That would have been what I would have hoped for. But the fact that she just said, oh, other people have gone, so what's the harm? And that ignorance and complacency is the problem when it comes to politics and Scientology in the UK.
Oh, totally. And you know what? Like, I think you phrased it properly then. That would have been a great politician's response to have not said yes or no, because she wasn't going to do that. I don't think I would have expected her to have said, no, I'm totally not going next year. I can't believe how terrible this organization is. I've fully opened my eyes. No, she wasn't going to say that. But if she would consider that, then that's progress. And that also means that what we're doing here, what this community online have been doing, whether that's emailing, sending letters, attending events, or otherwise, that means you're having a positive impact on people who matter, and positive impact further along the field. So that's
Yeah.
something we ought to take heed of.
I think what's also important is, I mean, we won't go through all of the responses that you got from all of the other candidates because they are on Scientology Business, the
Yeah,
article that you wrote, the link's down below for those who want to read it. But it's important to engage other politicians because you never know where they're going to end up. Even though we knew Mims Davies was likely to win, by getting the Labour candidate, the Green Party, the Lib Dem, and other people to comment on the same issue,
yeah,
it then puts more pressure on Mims Davies to respond. And you never know, the Labour candidate who didn't win the election might end up in a political job or a position elsewhere over the next 5 years where he suddenly has some power and authority, even though he didn't win the election as a member of parliament. So it's important to engage all the politicians across the spectrum for that reason, not just because they might be elected, but to get it on their radar. And now, thanks to you, all of the politicians that stood pretty much in East Grinstead are now aware that local residents are concerned about
yeah.
abuse at St. Hill. And I don't know how long it's been since someone could say that.
No, exactly. And that's a positive step, isn't it? It's not like we were going to change attitudes overnight, and it's not like that would be realistic. But if we're planting seeds, if we're doing bits and pieces here and there, it will build a wider picture and a wider web of things that we can hopefully then amalgamate at a certain pinch point, wherever that be, whatever that be for, to create some effective and long lasting change. That's why when I emailed all my local candidates as well, only one of them got back to me, but nevertheless, I can use that as a negotiating tactic now. When I eventually meet my new MP, I was hoping to see them on the weekend actually at an event, but I didn't. But I can use that and say, oh, well, this guy responded to me and said this. Now that you're elected, do you have an idea about this? Because I emailed you on the 15th of bloody blah saying this. I never heard anything back.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's something that we can use later on down the line. And yeah, we can only hope that it's going to be effective.
And let's not forget that those who stood in the election but didn't win, who therefore aren't MPs, are still local residents. And
Yep.
therefore, the politician that did win is bound by parliamentary law to represent those people, his opponents or her
Yes.
opponents. So even if the MP or the prospective MP candidate that you spoke to didn't win, the one who did win has to now represent them as well as you. So by getting them on board, that's now two local residents who that MP has to represent in Parliament with concerns about Scientology.
Even better, they are both local politicians who also commented on it. They are locally elected councillors, so it's on their
Exactly.
radar. If anything were to happen, they're not in East Grinstead Town Council, but in their respective town councils, it's known to them. It's not like they can feign ignorance there. Let's just hope that that message is spread loud and clear to others within their councils and constituencies also.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we go through some of these questions that I've been
Let's do
starring
it.
as we're going on? Before we do, anyone watching this, please head over to Austin's channel, Devotion Demystified, and show him some of the SPTV love and give him a subscribe. You've got a couple of videos up there. You did
I
one with
have,
Chris
and
Sutton, you did one with myself, you've done
yeah,
one
there's
with
some lives as well there. It's a shame I haven't done more, but due to various things going on behind the scenes, some of which I can talk about, some of which I can't, I haven't been able to speak publicly as recently as I would like to. But I have a summer break coming up, of which I've got some things planned. So keep an eye out, and hopefully I can add to this community in a positive way with my skill set and my knowledge on various bits and pieces. Not that I'm,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Well, you have been a huge asset already.
cheers, man.
And thank you for that. Okay, Love It said, did you feel your questions on the Church of Scientology were taken seriously?
Yes, actually, by all three. One of the candidates didn't want to respond because she wanted to take it seriously enough and be educated enough to respond, which I think says actually something quite highly. She had integrity there when she was questioned. Did I feel that the question that I posed to the Hustings panel was taken seriously? Yes, because there's been events that I've also had to sending questions to in advance, and they've been dismissed or not even acknowledged before. This one was both acknowledged and seemed like it was on the list of things to be spoken about. It was just not obviously as far up the list as we would have liked it to have been. So yes, they were taken seriously. Hopefully they're taken even more seriously next time I send an email off.
And also, let's not forget that this is only just the beginning. You know, like when I met and spoke with different candidates in the election run up, I'm now doing the follow up work and emailing those who are successful. And I've got a meeting in September with an MP who wasn't an MP before, that I'm going to be going to talk about how we can get Scientology debated in Parliament. And it's that follow up work that's going to take time. Even though your question wasn't asked in front of everybody, you've now met Mims Davies. So when you email her and say, hey, we talked about Scientology at the hustings, she'll know who you are. So you've got a little bit of an in there, which is funny because what we're basically doing is safe pointing, but for a positive result rather than
Exactly. Well, we can say it's safe pointing, or we can say it's networking and just having genuine conversations for the betterment of communities, because that's what we're doing, isn't it? We're just trying to build relationships that are honest, open, and are based on reason and fact, rather
and just
than
ask questions rather than wanting to control like that. I think that's the difference between safe pointing and networking. Is like safe pointing is with the view to control the local area and its politicians, whereas what we're doing is networking. We're building relationships, and it's up to the politicians how they act and how they decide and so on. But by raising our concerns and voicing our concerns, they are the ones that can do something about it, and it's up to them if they do or not. But our job as activists is to educate, inform, and do what we can to raise public awareness, which is different from safe pointing. Mrs. J, thank you for giving a membership to somebody. That's very kind of you. Elron Hubbard is in the chat. Always answer questions with a question. Is that a question?
I don't know. Is it? I don't know. Can I answer? But yes, you know, that's typical politician speak, isn't it? Always want to answer a question with a question, avoid having to put an answer down, and then you're all good to go, and you avoid any controversy.
Yeah, absolutely. Karen is saying a lot of politicians are shockingly and sadly uninformed. We're hoping to change that, Karen.
Yes, yeah.
Austin and I and everyone else that's behind the scenes helping us and doing this activism work in the UK. We're hoping to change that, but it's going to take time.
Yeah. And exactly, and this is why I think it's so important that you can just do a little bit here and there. You know, you don't need to dedicate all your time and resources and money to this sort of thing. But, you know, an email costs nothing. It costs 20 minutes of your time, probably, if that, to put something together just to hopefully educate people so that we can change that tide. And I know a lot of people are doing some excellent work. So please do keep it up.
Ubik Brad here is saying Mims Davies ignored my request for comment on at least a few times. She's ignored me too, flat out, which is why I think it was important to get you to go, Austin, in person, because there's no escaping the question if you're there in front of her. Brad, I don't think you're alone in trying to get through to Mims Davies, but with no success.
No, it's not like she can say that she missed my email when I'm standing right in front of her.
Yeah, exactly. And on a similar vein, Love It here said, do you feel Mims Davies is being sincere about her reaction to your question? If they don't know about the abuse, can they answer with any force?
Yeah, I think with a lot of this, as was with Fraser Viss's response, I think she's playing a fair and safe line by saying, right, if someone has any reports of abuse, I'm not going to really comment on it, because who knows if they're substantiated or not. However, you do need to have, obviously, the fair representation, and you need to report it through the fair, pathways. But I think she was being sincere about her reaction. She wasn't as authoritative as she could have been, but we've done what we wanted to, which is to open this conversation up, plant a seed in her mind, and now that as and when I next see her, because I'm sure it will happen at some point, hopefully not outside of St. Hill in November, we can talk to her about it.
Absolutely. You're well put, 100%. SB Crusader Lini is saying, I can't express just how mad it makes me, and don't get me started on Liz's sandwiches. That's funny. The thing is, Liz's sandwiches is becoming a thing that I'm hearing a lot of people talking about. Liz Osterman invites politicians like our favorite Dick Sweatman to go to St. Hill and have cucumber sandwiches with the crust cut off in the manor house. Liz's sandwiches are a bargaining tool and a way of her gaining authority and influence over the council. So when councillors and politicians say, what's the harm in just going and having some sandwiches with Liz? Well, this is the thing. You're giving them an ability to claim legitimacy, and you are enabling further abuse just by showing up. Because what they'll do is they'll snap pictures of you eating Liz's sandwiches, and they'll put it on the website, and they'll say, look, our local MP came to St. Hill, or our local MP wrote us a nice letter, and therefore we're a legitimate religious organization, and therefore anything that anyone says about us, about abuse and human trafficking and all of this, is completely absurd, because our MP wouldn't come to our event if we were abusing people, would she? That's the mindset of a Scientologist, and that's why Liz's sandwiches are dangerous.
Exactly. It's just another photo op, isn't it?
Yeah, precisely. AT check. Do you have a handout that you can easily give to them to educate? We use handouts when I'm working with legislature in the US. That's a really good question. I've been working with a lot of politicians, and I find that individual relationship building and individual private conversations are really effective, because when I've sent out an information sheet or a general email that's kind of copy and pasted or whatever, then the response I get is much lower, because politicians will look at it and they'll realize it's not personal, and it will just go straight in the trash can. By building personal relationships, having individual conversations, I think they take it more seriously. So that's where I've been going with it. But what I have been doing is using a template of like, okay, what's the structure of things that we need to get across, and different rulings that have happened in the past, and things people have said in the government before, and that stuff can be adapted. But I think that there is a need for an information sheet. We've got the iesprotestwebsite.com. I should probably update that.
Yeah, exactly. There's loads of different ways that we can inform people and educate them. And I'd agree. I think relationships are really important, especially when we're talking one-to-one. It's not like we're preaching to a large crowd of people. Handouts can definitely work. That's something that I think, especially in the run-up to potentially November, we can think about. I'd say that'd be quite handy. Handy.
Rachel Chick is saying we have the individuals take the handouts with them and explain them to the elected officials. Yeah, that's a really good tactic. Absolutely.
Yeah, have a takeaway. It's something that will stick with people longer than your words.
Yeah, and it's better than just a business card or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Dr. Rex is in the house. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Rex says, hi guys, great live. They will still go even though they know it's a bad idea. A big check will make them ignore any negatives. Well, that's what we've seen historically. You know, the mayor accepting a £50,000 check on behalf of his chosen charity, which also happens to be his employer, by the way, allowed him to look the other way and ask us to stop asking questions of him in council meetings. Money goes a long way, and that's why it's important here in the UK we talk about Scientology, because there's only 2,000 or so Scientologists here, but the majority of their wealth in Europe is generated through the IES event, which happens here in the UK. Scientologists from all over Europe travel to the East Grinstead to donate money. They're going to make £1 million in ticket sales for the patrons ball alone ahead of the event, before they've even built the tent this year.
Exactly. But let's put that emphasis on the word historically, because this hasn't occurred since, obviously, the activism that's happened post the IES event hasn't happened since the Guardian article, the Daily Mail article, the issues around East Grinstead Town Council. Let's hope that with the way that the discussions have gone since this time last year, that it will be they'll be more positive and people won't walk through those gates.
We'll see. Fingers crossed, at least. Last one, Danielle Chamberlain. Thank you so much, Austin, for all the work you're putting in to support Scientology victims like me. It's important that our voices are heard and acknowledged. And I just want to echo that as well. You know, with people like you, it's important, right? You have enabled us to have a stronger voice. You know, Scientologists, ex-Scientologists need the support of those who have never been in Scientology, that we're simply not going to get anywhere without the never-ins, whatever you want to call them. And it's people like you who lead the way. And yeah, thank you for that, because
Yeah.
you've been really active at going to these meetings and being proactive on the ground. And so it's really important for us.
No, yeah, thank you very much for those kind words. And honestly, it's something that I love to do. I have some skills and knowledge and stuff, and it's only fair that I pay that forward in a good way. And I help out people who deserve and need the help and the recognition that they haven't got up till now. So hopefully, I'm doing something positive. And thank you for the kind words, Danielle. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely are. One more comment I couldn't resist. Love it says, "Who knew cucumbers had this much power?"
I
Don't
know.
eat Liz's sandwiches.
The cucumber sandwich is so boring as well. Honestly,
I
get some
know.
better in. But hey, I don't know. Maybe it's her favorite one to make.
Maybe we should hold an event and have cucumber sandwiches for local politicians.
We ought to, yeah.
Yeah, see how that goes
Yeah, we
down.
should. But ours
Austin,
would be better than Liz's.
yeah, ours won't be laced with control and influence.
No.
Austin, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me again. Everybody go and check out his channel, Devotion Demystified. Show him some love. If you want to support the channel, you can buy coffee. There's links to PayPal, all that sort of stuff. You can read Austin's article on Scientology business in the link down below. And yeah, we will see you guys next time. Anything further to add before we wrap up, Austin?
No, other than thank you for obviously having this platform, for allowing me to write a little bit for your Scientology business, and hopefully it's going to have a positive impact. So yeah, thank you to everyone in the chat. I will be in contact, and I will be speaking a little bit more about various things Scientology related and not all very soon.
There you go. Thank you so much, Austin. We'll see you guys on the next one.